So thank you so much for joining in one of the very first session of Visual Studio Live. And it's very nice to see you all here very early morning. I hope you all have a great lab session yesterday and you all are ready to have full packed days of learning about Visual Studio and other developer tools and technologies. So in this session of getting the most out of latest Visual Studio, that is 1714, we will be talking about what is new, what is improved, and what is genuinely helpful for you to improve your developer workflow. So on the agenda today, we, as I said, will see some of the new features. We'll also see how you can use those features in real world issues or scenarios. Then we can help you make some plan to upgrade your developer workflow with those features. And if you're really not sure which session you should be attending in next 3 days, including today, we also have some great recommendation for the sessions depending on the features which we will be showing you today. So just before we start, a quick reminder to take a session survey at the end of the session. You can use the app or use the QR code. Your feedback is really important for us to improve our next demos and sessions. A quick introduction about me. I'm Harshada. I'm a product manager in Visual Studio's debugger and profiler team. And then I have an amazing co-presenter today, Jessie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Houghton, and I'm also a PM on the Visual Studio team. I work on GitHub Copilot.
So, as I said, we will be looking at some of the new features in 1714, but we'll also see how those features actually help you at each and every stage of your development workflow. So we'll see starting from fundamentals, we'll see how the new features in 1714 help you get your environment ready and set and go. When it comes to code, there are so many new improvements around Copilot and editor and code generation, which will not just help you improve your, in general, coding practices, but it will also help you write your code much more easier, faster, and actually smarter. When it comes to debug and test, we have some improvements which will actually help debugging and profiling experience across the platform for all of our different types of users, not just our .NET developers, but we have some improvements for our C++ users, as well as some of our .NET MOBI users as well. And now when it comes to review, we have some improvements in 1714, which will help you write great PR comments, but it will also help you do nice code reviews locally as well. So let's get started into looking at the new features in each of these particular stages of your development workflow. So starting with fundamentals, the very, very first thing we have and we are super proud of, that is the Copilot is fully integrated in Visual Studio and it is actually free to use. So just a quick question for you all. How many of you use Copilot in Visual Studio today? Those are a lot of hands and I'm really impressed. But I still see there are a few people who haven't raised their hand. So not to put you on your spot, but this is a sign you can actually use Copilot for free in Visual Studio. And each and every feature which we will be showing you today, a Copilot feature, or whatever features you will see throughout the Visual Studio Live, those all features are actually free to use with Copilot free. And the best part, you can actually use your GitHub account, your Microsoft account, or even a Google account to sign in. So definitely there is no excuse that you shouldn't be using Copilot today in Visual Studio. So if you haven't, do give a try and let us know your feedback. Another very, very fundamental improvement, which will actually affect each and every one of you who uses Visual Studio, is that we actually changed our release cadence from 1740. So traditionally, Visual Studio used to have a quarterly release, but now we actually have a monthly release cycle. So what that means for you, that we will actually able to bring new improvements specifically around AI and Copilot to you much more faster. We will also bring your feature improvements, your bug fixes and quality improvements every week, not just month. And then we will actually bring up your feedback and features based on your feedback much more quicker to you as well. But I think the best part with the new monthly release is that you have more transparency in the release cycle. So you can actually plan your upgrade and you can always make sure you are on the latest Visual Studio so you can get most out of it. So I think this is something that will affect each and every one of you who uses Visual Studio. The next fundamental improvement we have is around our extensibility or extensions. We made many different improvements around our extension manager recently. So if you deal with a lot of extensions, or if you like to customize your Visual Studio using extensions and you install a lot of them, there are some of the nice to have improvements such as auto updates. So whenever there are Visual Studio detects that your extension needs an update, you will have a notification in your extension manager that will tell you that your extensions are ready to upgrade or update further. You'll also have a filter in your extension manager, a new filter that will show you pending changes. So all the extensions that needs update or needs some have some pending changes will be filtered with those as well. And finally, if you don't want any of your extensions to be included in the auto update, you can exclude them using the exclusion list. So all you need to do is provide the exclusion list, and then the Visual Studio won't update your extensions automatically. Finally, a bigger update in the extension manager is that we actually support extension packs. So extension packs is something like a group of extensions. Those could be installed at once. So all you need to do is define your extensions in the .config file, and then you can import those using the configuration manager. And as you can see on the side here, you will have all the extensions in your installation installer, and then you can install all of them together at once. So that makes you really easy to get started with a bunch of extensions at once as well. So these were some of the basic improvements in the extensibility, which will actually help you get started and customize your Visual Studio much more faster. Another security improvement we did was around our enhanced NuGet authentication. So we have a new authentication process for our NuGet authentication feed. So if Visual Studio detects that there are any potential security issues around NuGet, it will show you this new dialog that will actually give more context about the authentication feed. And it will also tell you if there are any specific accounts that need any special needs. So I think this really enhances our multi-factor authentication. So this is a great security update for users who use NuGet frequently. I think these were some of the fundamental updates, but we have a lot to go. So I'm going to hand it over to Jesse for our next session, and they will take from there.
Sounds good. All righty. Well, thank you so much for kicking us off, Harshita. I've got a ton of updates in this code section, so it might feel like rapid fire. One of our goals today was to help you come up with your plan for how to get the most out of Visual Studio, right? And we're really focusing on 17.14. So as we go rapid fire, it would just be awesome if you all could think about like one thing that you want to take away and try. And if we go too fast or there's something you missed, feel free to kind of reach out to us afterwards. We'll be hanging around the session and there'll be lots more content. You'll see a lot of these things maybe going into more depth in other sessions as well. So starting with the little big things, I wanted to talk about a few quality of life updates that we've brought into the editor. We know you're spending 40 hours a week staring at Visual Studio, and so we want to make that a good experience for you. First thing is solution-based color themes. This is exactly what it sounds like. When you've got multiple solutions that you're kind of going between, it can be really nice to be able to tell at a glance which one you're looking at. Sometimes you've got a personal project or a work project kind of open up side by side. So this is that little bit of convenience factor that we get by making the color themes tied to your solution. The next one is preserving your font preferences, no matter what theme you're working with. And so we've tried to do our best and respect all of the preferences that you've taken the time to configure in your Visual Studio instances. And so we wanted to make sure that you're getting that same font preference that you want across any theme that you're working in. So those two kind of work together if you've got two solutions and you want to make sure that you've got that same experience. Getting into some design work. When you're working with XAML, we've come out with a pretty awesome new update where you can get that live preview of your XAML design at design time, so I can open that up and make changes into my XAML and see it reflected live as I'm creating changes. This works seamlessly with all of our other live previewing tools. You might be super familiar with working with Hot Reload and the other live tools like the Visual Tree. So what I really like this for is when I'm working with the Copilot agent and it's making changes in the front end, I can actually visually see those changes while it's making them, and I can respond quicker because I can see the updates happening in real time. So this is a really cool one. And if you want to see more about working with this, I would recommend checking out the Building Mobile and Desktop Apps with VS and .NET MAUI later today. So we didn't get far without talking about our favorite topic, Copilot. I want to talk about some of the updates we've made to Copilot in the editor. And when we say meeting you where you are, we're really talking about this ambient AI idea, where we can try and anticipate what your next move is and bring you a suggestion or bring you some value directly where you're working instead of you having to go out and seek out that update or that suggestion. So first thing, I saw people raise their hand for using Copilot. I'm assuming most of those are for the great text completions. Raise your hand if you've been using those completions that just come up as you're typing. Awesome. Hopefully, if you've uploaded the latest version of Visual Studio, you've seen a big jump in performance and quality from those suggestions. We've updated to a better model to support better suggestions coming at you. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't preventing you from moving forward because it's right there in your flow. And so that performance improvement is hopefully going to be a big boost. The next thing that I really love is called adaptive paste. So if you're anything like me in a session, you might be copy and pasting when you're scaffolding out a new resource, or you are trying to grab some example from the web or from somebody else's PR, and you want to paste that in, and then your next step is kind of adapt it to make sure it actually works in your code base. So let me run this video really quick. You can see I've got this math utility class. I've actually gone and copied this ceiling function. And this is something you do all the time, right? You're creating a new function and you grab the old one as kind of a template to get yourself started. But you see there's this little suggestion to adapt my code. If I click tab at that moment, it's going to anticipate you probably didn't actually want two ceiling functions. And so it's seeing based off of the context of your class, the context of the file that you're working in, how might you want to adapt that pasted code into something new? So here it's actually saying, okay, you want another function in this class. Let's actually make that a floor function. And it's gone through the trouble of changing my doc string. It's gone through and fixed up everything and given me a first step implementation of what that new functionality might be. This is actually just the beginning. The different kind of things that adaptive paste can do is it can actually adjust your code styling and your formatting to match what's already in your page. It can do language translations. So if you're grabbing that example from Stack Overflow, but it's not in your preferred language, it can translate that for you. And then what we just saw was an example of fill in the blank or continue the pattern kind of work that it can do. And I love that it just is trying to anticipate my next move so I can save a couple extra steps when I'm trying to scaffold something out. So we saw it anticipate your actions while you're coding with the gray text, with the adaptive paste. Now let's see it anticipate my next action while I'm doing doc comment generation. Does anybody use the // shortcut? Yeah, I see a couple hands, awesome. We've built upon that to allow you to use // which gives you the scaffold, right? It shows you what that XAML outline for your doc comments is going to look like. And then you see a little thinking icon now when you use it. And that's Copilot taking a look at your function and actually filling in all of those parameters for you. So now you just type //. You don't even have to type in any of the description because Copilot is taking a look at your function and it's writing that whole string for you. Awesome. I'm glad that we've got some benefit coming at you from these. All right. And then we were talking about scaffolding a little bit earlier. A lot of times when you create new classes, you kind of end up with a lot of those like non-implemented exceptions. And that's like, those are like to-do items in your workflow. You're going to go back and implement them. But what if you could get the first round of that implementation done for you? Anytime you have a non-implemented exception now, you can right-click, go to Implement with Copilot, and it'll give you that first run through of what you might want to be putting into that functionality. This is another way that we're just trying to clean up some of your items, and it kind of feels like magic. When I get a first implementation of all of those things, I've basically scaffolded out my class, and I can even test it and see that it works before I go back and add more performant code or dial it into exactly what I was trying to do. All right, last thing on this slide is I wanted to call out a few updates we've made to make working with CMake a little bit easier. The IntelliSense, so your hovering tooltips and completions, so that gray text that comes in from Copilot. We've made it smarter while working with CMake scripts. And we wanted to provide this so that folks working with those CMake script files actually have better support. It makes it a little bit easier to get those written. It can be a pain right now. So calling that out. And then the biggest ticket item for working in your editor that we've released in 17.14 is going to be next edit suggestions. This is a super cool action-based system that, based off of the previous actions that you've made and the context of your broader file, it can anticipate your next action no matter where that is. So, when you're typing completions, it's right there on the line that you're typing. But a lot of times you're moving around the file. If you're doing a refactoring, you're moving from the top and editing things as you go down. So what this does is it makes that process so much faster. Right now, I've got this pretty simple class, and I'm adding this new max attempts variable. And based off of the context, the first thing that you saw Copilot do is say, oh, you're adding a new variable. It's called max attempts. Based off of what I know about your program, you probably want to use this in the while loop as another conditional. Let me go ahead and suggest that as a next step. You can always choose not to tab to get to that if you wanted to do something else. But when it gets it right, it feels so smooth. I can just like tab, 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 and keep going around. And it does a really good job of anticipating what my next action is going to be. So I'm going and I'm adding that conditional. And then now I am navigating to another place. And based off of what I've just done, adding that variable, adding it to the conditional, and now navigating to my console.writelines, it's like, oh, obviously you want to add a new write line that has to do with this new variable. Let me just suggest that for you. This is one thing it can do. I've seen a really cool example of translating from old C++ styles to newer C++ styles. And it does a really good job of anticipating, oh, you're going and fixing up this kind of thing. Let me find all the next places that you want to go do that. And then you can just click tab, 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 and get to that end state so much faster. All right. Moving along, we talked about editor-first approach to AI-augmented development. So ambient AI that kind of meets you where you are. If you actually prefer a more prompt-first approach, we've got tons of goodies to share for the Copilot chat. First thing I want to talk about is models. Everybody's hearing about like a new model coming like every month. It's kind of hard to keep up with, but luckily you don't have to think about that because we're always trying to get the latest models in as soon as possible for you all to try out. Some to call out right now is we have Claude 4, Sonnet, and Opus available. These have been really top performers. And you want to use these for thinking tasks. These can be better at tool calling. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Gemini 2.5 Pro is also available. And If you don't want to think about what model you're using, it can be a lot on top of the actual work you're trying to do. Our new default is GPT 4.1. This is super fast compared to what we had before. I barely change from this default because I find it does a pretty good job for me, and I only switch to the other ones if I want another variant or I want to try something that I think is going to be a little bit more complex. But just the speed that I get with GPT 4.1 is pretty great, and so I'm happy that we've got that as the new default. And if you're somebody that loves exploring and checking out new models, or you've got some limitations in your organization and you want to use local models instead of these ones that are hosted, we've actually got a bring your own key option that's coming soon. So definitely stay tuned for that. The next thing I wanted to share is, if we've learned anything about working with LLMs, it's not just the model that matters, right? If you don't have great context to help the model figure out what it's trying to do, it's going to fall on its face. So we've added some more context to Copilot in 17.14. You've got the ability to leverage the output window. So if you've got debug errors, build errors, if something is running in your application and you want to check it out, you can actually ask directly from your output window. This is the one that's integrated into Visual Studio, so it's where you're looking and working anyways. Or you can even use natural language to prompt in the Copilot chat prompt box and say, hey, could you take a look at why my build might be failing? And it knows implicitly to go grab that output context for you. So love working with that, and always want to mention that we've got the ability to process and look at images as well. There are some things that it can just pull in directly from your IDE, but if you've got a running application and you want to get Copilot up to date, or you've got a Figma mockup and you want Copilot to get a really good understanding, sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words, and I can spend all day prompting and writing text to try and describe what's happening on the screen. But I don't have to do that when I have the vision capability and I can just paste a screenshot right in there. Along with these extra contexts that you're adding in, obviously we want to make sure that the base context, the ability to index through your code base and figure out what files should I change, what files should I reference in this change, so I'm following the existing styles. We've improved the code base indexing, and you'll see even more improvements coming that leverage remote indexing too, from GitHub and then soon from the Azure DevOps side. And one thing that I want to call out is, you've done all this work thinking about your context, you've done all this work thinking about making sure Copilot is aware of your code base. You should save that in prompt files and then share that with your team. So if you're the person on your team that's really figuring out how to work with AI and make it work well for you and your repo, share that, share the love, make sure that other people on your team can leverage these prompt files. And it's also just nice that you don't have to sit and rewrite a very long prompt or a very detailed thing when you figured out a workflow. You can save it into a prompt file. These live in the .github folder at the root of your repo. You don't need to be on GitHub as your Git provider. It's just called the .github folder because it's working with GitHub Copilot. And then in the .github folder, you've got the prompts folder, and in that, you can create prompt files that you can reference directly from the prompt box. So it's a great way to save and share all of the goodness that you might be experiencing when working with Copilot. And last but not least, if you want to bring the most benefit with the least amount of effort when working with Copilot, I would highly, highly recommend taking a look at your Copilot instructions file. This file is just an extra place to add context that you want Copilot to have every single time it creates a response. So if you ever see any quirks or weirdness coming in from Copilot chat responses, I would recommend the first thing that you do is write down exactly how you want Copilot to behave in those scenarios and put it in your Copilot instructions.md file. This is also at the root of your repo in your .github folder. And every time that you request an answer from Copilot, it's going to read that file and make sure that it's not running into any specific snafus that have to do with your repo. And we've found people have a ton of success reducing the amount of repetition that they have to do when they're working with Copilot when they have these instructions in place. I know it's a lot. I'm trying my best to break things down. The latest and greatest thing that I will talk about related to Copilot in that prompt development workflow is Agent and MCP. Have you all heard of Agent Mode or tried it out? I've got a few hands. Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have shown enough cool demos and enough things that at least makes you want to try Agent Mode. But I really think that what Agent Mode does is it gets you from a place of working alongside the Copilot to doing more delegation to the Copilot. So everybody's at their own place of how much they trust the agent to go off and do on its own. You can take approaches where you're actually giving very, very specific instructions. And we call that spec-driven development, where you come up with all of the requirements that you want it to do, and you feed that in at the start. That is more of a one-shot approach where you can get really good responses right away. But you can also take a multi-turn approach and work with it step by step and tune it, or allow it to go and make some decisions on its own. And then you can validate that later. That's very similar to working with a new hire on your team. So it's a paradigm that we're more comfortable with. And the agent is getting better with every improvement. Basically, the agent's difference between regular ask mode is it can do extra actions inside of your editor, like going and fixing bugs, editing files, building the solution, running your tests. So these are all things that you might expect from a tool that it's built in and integrated into Visual Studio. So we're trying to deliver on that promise of the AI really understanding what's going on in your broader IDE. And then who's heard of MCP? Keep your hand up if you know what it stands for. And I see some hands go down. That's totally fine. You'll hear the words MCP said lots of times this week. It stands for Model Context Protocol. This is an open source protocol that is made popular to allow agents to have extra context and tools provided by anybody. So you and your organization can create an MCP server that works internally to connect your code with your internal wikis, your internal docs, even your ticketing system, to make it that much easier to work on your items that traditionally would happen outside of Visual Studio. You can bring them in and you can let the agent know about those possibilities. So some things that I like to do is connect my GitHub MCP server, and then I can access all of my issues. I can assign issues, and I can look at what I've got on my docket all within Visual Studio. I don't have to leave. Few updates we've made to MCP recently. We've made it really easy to get a remote server working using the VS Keychain. So if you've got any MCP servers that are working through GitHub or through Microsoft, it's really easy to authenticate with them. We've also made it easy when you're working with an mcp.json file. This is how you configure your servers. You've got this code lens capability that allows you to see if your server is in need of restarting or if you need to input any extra variables. And those were just some of the things that MCP is bringing. There's another session that I would highly recommend you check out if this is at all interesting to you. The next generation of developer productivity with GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio. They'll dive more deeply and give you a really great example of how MCP with the agent can help your workflow. One more thing I wanted to share in the realm of agents. That's actually not true. I've got two more things. This is the first one. We've got the coding agent, and this is your agent in the web. So we've talked about working with your agent in Visual Studio, but sometimes you actually want to do full delegation. There's a series of bugs coming in, and you guys are in a feature development sprint, and you don't have the bandwidth to go and tackle those bugs. Why not let Copilot take a first whack at it? If I run this video, you can actually see integrated with the GitHub MCP server, I'm going to type in, hey, assign this issue number 6 in my live demo to the GitHub, in this GitHub repo to Copilot. And what the agent is going to do, it's going to understand from your code base, understand from your request there, what it is that you're asking for. So you saw it run this tool call to understand what you were actually asking for. It runs this get user profile, and that's one of the tools provided by the MCP server. So it actually understands which repo that you're talking about. You can always choose to accept different actions that are provided by your servers so that you can stay secure. The next thing that it's going to do, if I skip ahead a little bit, it's running a get issue tool, which is also provided by the server. You can accept that. And then it's running the assign to Copilot tool. And what that's going to do is it's going to assign your issue to Copilot in the web. And what you'll get back is a created pull request that you can then review just like you would when working with a colleague. A great workflow for this that I've heard is, I'm working on a new feature, I'm creating this pull request, and as I'm making my changes, I actually see a lot of other issues that I would love to address, but they're not in the scope of this PR, right? It would just be confusing if I tried to address all of these issues in the same PR for my reviewers. So instead, what I can do is quickly just go to the chat, say, hey, I noticed this issue, create this issue for me, assign it to Copilot, and then you parallelize the work that you're doing, making it easier to do more in the same amount of time. Alrighty. This is the final thing I wanted to talk about related to agents. So you've got an agent in VS, you've got an agent on the web. What about the agents that you might want to create to make your life easier or the lives of your end customer easier? The M365 Agents Toolkit is available inside of Visual Studio. It's another component that you can download using the Visual Studio installer. And this makes it really easy to create either declarative agents or custom engine agents. Declarative agents are just going to look like, if you've checked out Microsoft M365, it reuses the same interface, but you can toggle and give it specific knowledge sources. So I've actually been working with my design team recently to create an M365 declarative agent that looks at all of our SharePoint and our Teams channel resources to onboard a new designer to the team quickly and easily. I'm sure everybody's had the experience in onboarding where you have a million questions and you're trying to figure out how to best make the use of your time when you're actually syncing with new members of the team. Let Copilot take care of answering maybe 80% of those questions, and then you can get started thinking about what's important right away. Custom engine agents just give you a little bit more control and customization for the agents that you might want to create either for yourself or for your end customer. So just wanted to call that out. It's something that you can do from the comfort of Visual Studio. You don't have to go and learn a new interface on the web to go and create and work on these agents. Okay, taking a deep breath. We made it to the end of the code section. I'll pass it back to Harshita to talk about debugging and profiling.
Thank you, Jesse. So I think in the start, I mentioned that in the debug and profile section, we have some improvements for everyone. So starting from some quality of life or like some small updates, which will actually be very helpful is, has anyone do or like normally does link debugging in Visual Studio? Like, you have link expressions. So you all know it's not very easy when you have like a big link expressions and you will have to debug through it or try to find out what's going on with your link expression. Or if it's not returning the exact data you want it to. So what we recently did is we added a data tip. So whenever you have a link expression, at each and every clause of it, you can hover over it and you will get a very similar data tip as you get for a normal object or any other variable. And you can actually see the data at each and every step and validate if it's correct or not. So if I play this video here, you will see, you will have this data tip at each and every clause. You can see the data in the data tip, or you can use the INumerable visualizer associated with that data tip to see the data more. Let me go back a little bit, in more detail and in more structured format. And you, as I said, you get that each and every step. So you can actually validate each and every clause of yours. And when you hover over the last clause, you can actually also do analyze with Copilot to understand what that particular expression is doing. If it's not returning the values or the data you expected, you can actually also use that chat to update or figure out what's wrong with your expression. You can play around with Copilot and ask to update your query as well. Another way you can actually update your link expression is, let me go back again. When you, if you decide to use enumerable visualizer, you have an option to create or improve your link query using this particular Sparkle button. That gives you an option to have an inline chat within the visualizer. So it has all the context about your data, and then you can also update your query. So this is just a small update, but it actually helps you when you're debugging through or stepping in and out of your link queries. Another smaller but important update is around our profiling tools. So if you use profiling tools in Visual Studio, we have many integrated profiling tools like CPU usage tool, .NET allocation tool, and many others. So I think in 17.12 or 13, we integrated Copilot with our CPU usage tool. So whenever you run your CPU usage tool, when you get the CPU usage summary, you will also get some Copilot insights with them. What those Copilot insights do, it gives you a step ahead to optimize your code and give you exact issues which are happening in your code. We brought that similar concept in .NET allocation tool as well. So now whenever you run your .NET allocation tool, you will have these top insights generated by Copilot. Right now, they are more around your zero length array allocation. So those array allocations like one and here and there, those are completely fine. But if you have like hundreds and 200s zero length allocation, that will actually can cause a lot of memory usage or memory allocation usage. So I think what we did is we added the top insights and we provided a couple of ways to investigate that. You can investigate manually as you normally do. But we also have an Ask Copilot button here. So if you do that, again, Copilot has all the context about your code, your issue, or exact place where the issue is happening. And it will give you an exact solution where you should be going and investigating or changing your code to get better memory allocation. So if you're interested in your in the profiling tool or optimizing code, there is a session which is happening tomorrow, which you should definitely attend. We have few features which we haven't announced anywhere, which I can't disclose right now, but you should definitely check out this session to know about those. Our engineering lead of profiling is actually giving this session, so you are getting it from an expert as well. So these were some of the basic or like smaller update. There are some updates which we did in debugging recently, which we are actually really proud of. And that is one of them is C++ dynamic debugging. So this was one of the top asks from our game developer users or gaming studio users. So again, if you do C++ develop or debugging an optimized code is not actually a very good experience right now. So that's why we actually brought C++ debugging, dynamic debugging. So with the dynamic debugging, you can actually not just write and run the code, but you can actually step through or place the breakpoints or just have like a normal debugging session with your optimized code as well. So if I play this video, you will see you will have this de-optimized code in your call stack, like a tag here, so you will know what you're dealing with. And then you can step through or place breakpoint, even conditional breakpoint, see all the local and variables in your locals autos windows as if you're debugging through any other code. So I think this gives a very good benefit if you're dealing with game development, and you can easily get experience of debugging in general. So right now, it's not on by default for everyone. So if you wanted to try it on, you just need to go in your project configuration settings and turn on the dynamic debugging setting, and you should be able to do that. There are some more features and some more updates. Those are coming in this particular experience. So we will have a hot preload enabled in this in upcoming releases as well. Another update, oh, yes. And if you wanted to know more about debugging in general in Visual Studio, actually specifically empowered with Copilot, there is another session tomorrow, which is Failure Fixes with Visual Studio Debugging powered by Copilot. You should definitely attend that. We have a lot more than just breakpoints and variable values. That is, we will be trying to have everything you will need for debugging with Copilot in that session. Another major update we did in this particular 17.14 release is we actually brought a mono debugger engine for .NET MOBI development. So this is a fully integrated engine that works along with Visual Studio. So you have a very similar experience as if you're debugging using Visual Studio Debugger. Again, there are many features of normal debugger which you can use with this Mono Debugger engine. You can use just my code. So you can actually decide which code you are really important for you, and you will have all the other distractions removed. You will also be able to inspect your variables and as well as have variable values shown in your autos locals windows. So again, this is a preview feature, so you need to enable it through your preview feature settings. But again, very important to bring in a reliability and performance when you're doing a .NET MAUI development. I think Jesse mentioned it before, but if you wanted to know about this as well as the live preview which Jesse showed, you should definitely check out a session today at 3 about building more mobile and desktop apps. I think that's all I had in the debug and profile section. I'm going to hand it over to Jesse again.
Awesome. So this is the final section, and we'll be talking about review. So this is going to cover Git tooling updates that we've made that hopefully make your daily tasks a little bit smoother, feels more integrated into your workflow. Some quality of life updates that I want to call out. You've always been able to see your outgoing and incoming commits kind of as a number on the top of the screen. We recently actually got a developer community ticket telling us, hey, I see that number, but it's actually really hard for me to see within the Git graph which of those commits are actually outgoing and incoming when they're not in chronological order. So if you've got a branch that you've got multiple people working on, it might be difficult sometimes to see because the commits coming in order might be separate from one another, or you're coming back from vacation and you've got commits kind of in weird spots. So we've added a new toggle in your Git repository window that allows you to filter down to just the incoming and outgoing commits, and they're tagged with this little arrow icon. Let's see, this little arrow icon right here. And any other commits, whether they be chronological or further down in your history, you should be able to get that nice visual cue so that you know exactly what changes are going to be happening before you go ahead and take a Git action. Let's go on to the next one. I've got a few settings that might make your life a little bit easier. We know that folks love having their setup and their windows in a particular way, day in, day out. You don't want anybody messing with that configuration. And so we've allowed the Git repository window to be something that can restore automatically on restart. This is something to help out folks that love getting that kind of top-down view of what's going on in their repo all at once at the beginning of their session. And also know that this will affect your performance a little bit because you need to reload that whole window. But at least you're not having to manually open that up every single time if this is your preferred way to work. The next setting I want to mention is default branch naming. So small but mighty change. You can go and configure what your default branch is called in your Git config, but now it's available as a setting as well. Just makes it that much easier to get started in a new repository. You don't have to do any back and forth with your Git provider to make sure that your branches are named appropriately. And I just wanted to mention that all of those on the previous slide are actually things that came in on developer community. And so even if it might not happen immediately, we do read every single one of the developer community tickets that come in, and we couldn't come up with these great little quality of life improvements without folks giving us their feedback. And so we really just want to be grateful and extend like all of the goodwill for you guys helping make our experience that much better. We've got the local code review experience. This is something that's pretty cool. We've shipped it in, I think, 1712. So it's not brand new, but we'd love to see more folks try it out, give us more feedback, and help us understand how to make this even better. Essentially what it does is in your Git changes window, when you're getting ready to write your commit, it gives you that extra sanity check that you haven't introduced any bugs or errors in the code that you're currently working on. So it's a really scoped experience. This is different than the pull request review that you might have tons of lines changed and you need a bunch of human reviewers to go check out what's going on. This is just that quality of life, sanity check, make sure you didn't introduce any errors. I've actually seen this catch security issues that you might be introducing if you've forgotten and left a credential or something in your code. I've seen this catch that and allow you to make that change before you even push your code to the remote server. It can just be really nice to have a little bit of extra control. And something that's coming to even augment this is more customization. So we talked about the Copilot dash instructions folder earlier. You can actually use that instructions file also to talk about the specific things that you want Copilot to look at when it's doing this local code review at your changes level. And that gives you even more confidence before you submit your commit. So definitely try this one out. Okay, that brings us to the end of the content that we wanted to share in this session. I think we're doing actually very good on time. So we might be able to take some questions at the end if y'all have any. But we mentioned at the beginning that we really wanted to help you create that roadmap of how you're going to grab something to take home from the VS Live week with you. It's already, if you were in the labs yesterday, it's a lot of information that you're grabbing already. So yeah, go ahead, take pictures. The QR code goes to our release notes for 1714 that will have descriptions of everything that we talked about today. And I would just suggest maybe pick one thing overall or one thing in each category that you think might help you out, that you want to give a try. And if you've got questions, we'll be around. Just wanted to make sure everybody got their screenshots or their QR code things. Okay, cool. We have scratched the surface of all of the work that we're putting in to the latest versions of Visual Studio. There are a lot of upcoming features that you can really look forward to. We've got a refreshed UI experience. We've been really dedicated to making a faster startup experience for you all, deeper pull request integration opportunities, and more agentic capabilities coming in as well. So I just wanted to give you a glimpse to know where we've been working on these improvements and want to share those with you as soon as we can. And I just want to call out a few more related sessions that we didn't mention before. Do not miss today's keynote. I know it's at almost lunchtime. Do not miss it. Make sure that you're there. We've got Mads coming to share some really exciting announcements about what's coming for Visual Studio, the future. And we've got more sessions about getting the most out of .NET development. If you liked seeing some of those improvements we made around the doc comments and other little ambient AI moments, they'll go into more depth of those. And another session about the forgotten features of Visual Studio, because every release, if we had this many coming in for 1714, it's really easy to lose track of everything that's going on. And so we've got a great session put on by some of the developers on our team who are trying to refresh even features that you might not have heard of that were released a while ago, but can make that much difference in your workflow. Just wanted to finish off by extending our appreciation. We love working with you all, and we love seeing you all at these sessions. Make sure that you're continuing to communicate with us and developer community so that we know what to prioritize and how to move forward. And without you, we wouldn't have hit an incredible milestone of 50 million users. This happened in May, and it was super exciting to know that our community has just expanded to be this wildly large. Okay, that leaves us with time for questions. We'll quickly go through. We've got more content, obviously, that's going to be available for the rest of the week. Fill out your sessions. We'll leave this slide up, and we can take questions. Yeah. I think we've got, just make sure.
you mind passing that? Thank you.
Thank you. The question about the pricing for those more expensive models, is it going to be all incorporated in the same basic 20 or whatever dollars per month pricing that you currently have for the Copilot, for the GitHub Copilot? Or is pricing going to be based on the tokens? Like today, Claude Opus is the most expensive model, right? So how do you do that?
Yeah, that is a great question. Let me go back up because I think our camera won't pick me up unless I'm closer to the stage. So great question about Copilot billing. As you know, there's some models that are more expensive than others. And how that's going to work is that you'll still have your token allowance, and the more expensive models will take up more tokens. And so in Visual Studio, you'll see a little multiplier in your model picker, and that'll indicate how much more expensive in terms of tokens some of the higher end models are. And as I kind of emphasized earlier, feel free to use those models if you've got a particularly complex task, but I would always try out using the faster, maybe not as smart models first, and see if you get that great answer without spending those tokens already.
Hi, I just had a question about integration with third-party websites like Bitbucket and Jira. Is there any plans to do that, or does it work only with GitHub at this very moment? Like, for example, this feature that you have with the coding agent being able to assign issues to Copilot to deal with. Can I do that from something like Jira?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can get some of the integration that we were talking about, like viewing your issues or understanding what's going on in some of your tickets. I believe Jira does have an MCP server already out, so definitely check out that functionality. The coding agent, though, is a GitHub product, and so it's only going to be available in GitHub repos. There might be other third-party opportunities for you to try out things like that, and you might be able to see some background agent things coming in to VS Code, especially first. So keep that in mind. But yeah, that's the current integration.
Similar question about integration with, what is it called? Jazz or Rational Concert team thing? Do you know if you have integration for those for issue tracking? We call it RTC. I don't know if you're familiar with that acronym.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm familiar with, but MCP is an open protocol. And so if you take a look at Anthropic has the official MCP GitHub that has links to all of the servers that they're currently aware of that are available. And so you should be able to set up that integration with the agents if that's the level of integration that you were thinking of.
Another question I have is, best models, I guess they will always be hosted only in the cloud. Is that correct, pretty much? And local models will probably be delegated to simpler, smaller models. The problem is our company is super sensitive for some reason, doesn't allow us to use GitHub Copilot because they're afraid that inference is done in the cloud and God forbid, some code will leak out or something like that. Do you have some sort of material or something I can take together with me to our IT folks and say, hey, it's all guaranteed to be completely separated from the rest of the world and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I know that on the GitHub side, they have a lot of literature online. If you stop by, we can grab a link for you at the end of the session to share about the exact enterprise agreements and information that you would need to know to talk to your IT about the security scenarios. We also have folks that are in like their own enterprise cloud environments. And so their GitHub is going to be isolated from everybody else's GitHub. It's or like GitHub Copilot. And so it's going to be a different experience. Yeah, I think that's probably what you're thinking of. The comments about local models being smarter or local models being like smaller or not as capable is fairly true today. Where we've seen like if you've tried out Ollama, which has a lot of the local models, it really just depends on how powerful your machine is. If it can run something that has more smarts. But like anything else, there might be scenarios that are actually done pretty decently well by these smaller local models that don't take up as much cost to serve in the web. And so it's maybe worth trying out different scenarios and seeing what works best.
In that regard, do you have maybe a presentation or some example where an agent actually writes some code, runs the program, gets the output, iterates again and again until it gets to the final result? So it's kind of in action. It would be nice to see if whether it's different to my experience with Google's CLI, Gemini CLI, or with Claude Code.
Mm-hmm.
Those agents which are quite popular nowadays.
Yeah.
I think I would suggest you to check the keynote today.
Okay. Thanks.
And also I forgot the exact name of the Copilot session, which we have. You might have some examples in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we didn't want to add too many demos since we know we were overloading folks with a lot of information for today's session. But I know for a fact there are 2 demos that are shown in this session that will do exactly what you're talking about. It takes in some information, it makes some code changes, it attempts to build, it sees if there are build errors, it tries to recover, and iterates until it gets to your desired goal. And the user has to do maybe 1 or 2 actions throughout that whole flow. So if you want to see that in action, go ahead and check out this session.
What?
Today at 3 p.m., I don't think it's in this room. I think it might be across the way.
Yeah, and I think if you check the docs, github.com, there is a lot of documentation around in general about Copilot, the policies and how you can configure that with your organization restrictions and everything.
Okay. So one point is that we do have ability to use a corporate web-based Copilot, not GitHub Copilot. And I could not get why, if we have agreement with Microsoft that web-based Copilot is okay, GitHub Copilot is treated completely differently. So this is something that I talked to some Microsoft folks before, and I couldn't get an answer in terms of like, why is it a different style of separation or segregation of data?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As much as I understand and can answer about that is that they're just trained on 2 different sources of information. So the GitHub Copilot information that we got, like, that started maybe 3-4 years ago, right? It was trained on public GitHub repositories, is specifically for coding tasks, and was originally meant to create those completions and then expanded into more of a chat interface. The M365 Copilot is a different product, and it was built and trained differently. And so the details around the compliance and things are a little bit different right now. I can totally see a future at some point where we are able to cross the boundaries between those 2 and kind of integrate even your like Teams experience and other things that you're working with in the Microsoft ecosystem into your GitHub and your coding experience. But that's not the state today. You got a question up here?
The link debugging, by the way, I wanted to clap again. That was really amazing. That's going to really help things, I think, a lot,
Yes.
especially the visualizer in the middle. That's always really tough to debug, and you end up creating temporary variables to
Yep.
inspect. So that's going to really help. The one of the questions I had was in the agent mode, because I've only ever used the chat mode. I don't know if the agent mode is new, but does it have limitations on source control actions that it can take? Because I know there was something in the news recently. It was like, I think it was Replit or something, that the AI went rogue and deleted all the code in the database and all of that. So I'm just wondering, I have some higher permissions in our DevOps, and I wanted to make sure that it has some limitations around the source control stuff, so that it can't go like force push or really push it all on its own, or go delete a repo or something.
Yeah, these are really great questions, and super understandable to want to protect your code base and make sure that you're not letting anything happen outside of your control. So first, I'll answer about the source control capabilities it currently has. There are no tools that it currently has that access the Git history or anything right now. When we were talking about context earlier, there's a new context that's coming out really soon that'll allow you to access specific commits, that'll allow you to access information about the repository. But that's just context. It's not tools. So it's just providing information. If you wanted to do something like, I always forget how to add a feature flag here. Let me go find a commit where someone's already added a feature flag. I'll feed that into Copilot and I'll say like, hey, can you create me another feature flag using this as a template? That kind of scenario is something that we'll be enabling really soon. The question about tools, there are MCP servers out there, third-party MCP servers that work with Git and might have access to those tools, because what the MCP servers do is kind of connect the agent to actual things that you can do in your environment. So it connects it to the command line actions that you would be doing as a Git user. When you're working with those tools, you can actually see in the tool picker right here, you always have control to enable or disable any of the tools that are provided by these MCP servers. And then there's that second layer where it's actually executing. It will ask you every time before it executes a tool, and you can confirm whether or not you want that to run. So if it goes and says like, I need to push right now, and you're like, I don't think that that's something that you should be able to do, you can always dismiss it, and it won't go through with that action. If you're thinking about the Copilot agent or scenarios that are happening on GitHub, it's always creating draft PRs in new branches. It's not something that's going to go and impact your main branch without you going through and reviewing the PR or merging that manually. So there's a couple levels of safeguards in place before it can do damage to your repo.
Here first.
I have a question about the Copilot, the CPU profiler, and performance profiler in general. Can it also provide insights on like performance bottlenecks during runtime, similar to like how JetBrains .cover tool can like give you bottlenecks information and whatnot?
Yeah, I don't think so. It will provide Copilot insights during runtime. You will have to run CPU usage separately without runtime or without a debug mode. During runtime, you might just get the normal insights like how your CPU usage is, how your memory usage, but there is no integration during runtime yet.
Thank you.
And go here. I got a couple of questions. So when we use the VS Code, I think it got like ask, edit, and the agent mode. But then when you use Visual Studio, you only got the ask and agent.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some sort of toggle that we need to turn on for the edit mode in the Visual Studio, or is that only VS Code thing?
Yeah, so we actually had edit mode enabled, I believe, in 17.12 and 17.13, and that evolved into our implementation of the agent mode that's available in Visual Studio. And so you can't get into edit mode. For those of you who hadn't tried it out, basically edit mode was a way for us to prime the Copilot to think through a plan first and then execute on that plan. There were capabilities of, that was the first version of being able to edit across multiple files at once. But that functionality folded itself into agent mode. You can still prime it with a plan yourself, or you'll see if you give it really complicated instructions, it'll go, depending on what model you're using, it might go and create that plan first and then go through the iteration. But all of the benefits of the multi-file editing, streaming in changes, and being able to visualize those before you decide to keep the changes are all still available in agent mode. So yeah, it's a little bit confusing there being like different names for things. But we were hoping to make it a little simpler from the Visual Studio perspective to only have the 2 modes.
The other thing is in the VS Code, one of the things I think they added is to be able to create the Copilot instruction based on your source code. Is that feature available in the Visual Studio, or that's like upcoming feature?
That is, that's something that's upcoming. And if you wanted to do that today, all that the functionality is that you're seeing in VS Code is a button over a prompt. So it's basically like if you wanted to just type in the chat, take a look at my like hash solution, take a look at my code base and write up some instructions that might make it easier. That's essentially what the button is doing on their side. And so, yeah, I think it's a better experience to have that button one-click action, but you can always just use Copilot to help generate some of these helper files for you as well.
Okay, and the last one I got is I think to write the custom commit message and giving the instruction to the GitHub Copilot, I believe you have to go somewhere in the GitHub, and then if there's something we could add that in the Copilot instruction file, and then so that when we click on the GitHub Copilot Sparkle icon, then it looks at the Copilot instruction file rather than the settings file, so that we can maintain that in the Markdown file rather than the in the IDE itself. Can that be done?
Yeah. So this is a great question. Just for context. The feature that you're mentioning is the commit message generation. And we recently added the ability to customize that commit message generation because we know everybody likes to write their commits differently. Currently, it's only available in the settings menu for you to write that because that's an individual setting. It's not something that's checked in and would be available to the other folks in your repository. But I'll definitely take that feature suggestion into account. That there are scenarios where you and the rest of your repository are probably committing using the same kind of template, and it would be easier to have that in a backing file instead of in the settings. So definitely noted, and we'll think about that when we look at future customizations.
Thank you.
Hey, I know there's a set of languages that GitHub Copilot supports currently. Are there future plans to expand say for statistical analysis, languages like SAS or R?
That's a really good question. I don't know of any of the current plans to expand the language base. I know for we've got new models that we're working on for the completions experience and the next edit suggestions experience that are bringing in more and more examples for the languages that we know are the core languages used in Visual Studio. To make the quality better. But I don't know about expanding to other languages right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, we do a lot of Windows Forms development, and I don't know that it's specific to this necessarily, but we just occasionally run into an issue where we just need to clean the solution, and sometimes we even have to go as far as deleting the bin folders and the OBJ folders. There's third-party plugins that can do it, and it's easy to write a PowerShell one-liner to do it as well. Just curious if that's ever a feature that's being considered for Visual Studio.
So the idea of cleaning your solution to make sure it's in a good state, because sometimes there's it's unclear what's causing the...
Essentially, yeah, basically reset it, especially the bin and OBJ folders where it's creating a lot of artifacts that are kind of in between the final output.
Did you have an answer that you wanted to?
Yeah, so if you shift the details of what you're doing.
Sounds good.
We've got Mark Downey down here helping us out. So if you want to come chat with him.
that on the
I've got a question about the adaptive paste in languages. Is that primarily going to be used for languages currently supported by Visual Studio, or does that support other languages? For example, we're porting a Delphi application to C#. Can I paste my Delphi code in and have the adaptive paste refactor it to C# code?
This is a really good question. I think when we say that there are certain languages that Copilot supports and that it doesn't support, it's our confidence and how well it supports that language. It's not necessarily whether or not it might be able to come up with a good response for that scenario, especially because we're using and supporting so many different models. And a lot of those models, like we're not the source of the training data. So it's definitely something that you could try out. I don't think that adaptive paste is well suited for like whole project translations. It's more for in the flow copy pasting scenarios. But I've seen some success with folks porting from like TypeScript to C#, using the agent and walking through that as a more interactive kind of scenario where they've had Copilot go through a larger code base, tag all of the different functionality, and have it step-by-step walk through each of the files and try and do a first-level translation. And I know that saved one of our internal developers a lot of time working through that sort of transition. So yeah, I would definitely recommend trying out the scenario and then seeing if maybe doing more of an interactive flow with the either with Ask or Agent mode in Visual Studio gives you some decent results there.
we're about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, cool. We'll probably take a few more questions, like 2 more.
The color themes for the solution-based folder, I assume, is that just stored locally in like the .vs folder or something, or is that checked in? I have another actual question, but that's just a minor thing.
Yeah, I think that's just locally, yeah.
I was just wondering if when you have, if you're using Get Work Tree and you're working in 2 different branches and 2 different physical directories, if you could have different colors, because that's frequently, it's like, which one am I in? Because I have to hover and to see what the file path is. Mm-hmm. So that would be helpful. The other thing, I actually just wanted to add on to what he asked. I've also work in WinForms, but sometimes it's when I'm working on a library project that's not WinForms related, sometimes Visual Studio will just swear up and down that it's got a missing file or it's got errors that don't actually exist. And sometimes, like you said, the PowerShell, or sometimes I'm using WSL bash to do the find command and nuke the bin and obj folders. Sometimes that's not even enough, and I end up having to delete the .vs folder and close VS, delete VS, VS folder, open VS. And it would be nice to have like in addition to build clean, like build really, really clean or something. And yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah, build nuke. Exactly. That's a good suggestion. I mean, it'd be nice if Visual Studio didn't have those bugs, but those bugs have existed forever, for as long as I can remember. And yeah, that would be useful to have that kind of build nuke. That's a good suggestion.
I think we can again talk to Mark for a very, very clean option.
Yeah, I was chatting with someone in the lab yesterday about interesting uses I've seen of Copilot. And one of them was have Copilot help you write some of those scripts that make your life a little bit easier. So while we might not be able to like add that new functionality right away, you might be able to get the help of Copilot to do some scripting or automation for you. So kind of like turn that non-deterministic Copilot into something more deterministic as like a script file that you can then reuse and share. So something cool that might help.
That has worked.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. I think we're getting on time.
We could
take one more.
Let's. Do you plan to have a mode where GitHub Copilot agent can run outside of IDE completely? Or is it always gonna stay kind of within the IDE?
So the Copilot agent that's within the IDE and the coding agent that lives in GitHub are not exactly the same, but they have a lot of the same functionality. And so that's one level of what it is that you're thinking of. Being able to run like a background agent where it's doing work, but maybe it's like in another branch, or maybe it's on a dev box or something like that, are definitely interesting ideas that we're exploring. But before we bring it to you all, we want to make sure that it's a good experience.
Okay, and I have one more question about the dynamic debugging. How did you implement it? Is it like a more complicated PDB file? Do you know? Or
So what I know is behind the scenes, the Visual Studio convert that optimized bit to de-optimized code. So you can debug through that just for the debugging purpose. And that's how you get the easier way to debug through those optimized codes. Does that answer your question?
so basically, what you're saying is you absolutely need the source code to run this, right?
You would, yes, to de-optimize
To de-optimize.
your functions, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Or at least an access to the source code.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that brought us to time. Thank you so much for your questions and for joining us this early in the morning.